Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Preparing for Rebel Grad Slam, how to effectively translate your academic work for a general audience. My name is Alyssa Gardner, for those who don't know me, and I'm so excited for Rebel Grad Slam this year. It's just a few weeks away, and I hope you are all pumped to compete, probably a little nervous, but that's okay too. Luckily, today we have a panel of past RGS winners joining us to share about their experience, their tips and expertise for you all. So we have Dr. Kendra McGlothen, we have Nasibeh Arabameri, and we have Jenn Chandler here with us today. So they are going to share about their experiences. They're here to field questions that you might have. We also have a prepared set of questions to get the conversation going. But if you do have questions, I welcome you to type them in the chat. You can type them directly to me at the Grad Academy if you'd like them to remain anonymous for any reason. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and kick things off. So to get us started, I'd love to do a little bit more thorough introductions than what I provided for you all. So I'd love for Kendra, Nasibeh, and Jenn to share a little bit more about themselves. If you would just share briefly about your presentation, what your experience was like, and kind of what do you think maybe is one thing that set you apart from others in being able to advance in the competition? So first person I see on my screen is Jenn, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
I would love to. So the questions were, tell us more about the presentation, what set us apart, what was the third one?
Just who you are.
Who I am. I can do that. I can do that. So my name is Jenn Chandler, and I graduated from UNLV 2023. So it's only been like a year and a half. And I majored in, I was a grad student. I got an MFA in performance or in acting in the theater department in fine arts. And I'm currently teaching at a college in Utah. And my presentation for Rebel Grand Slam was all about the technique of acting because my degree was obviously in performance. And so when I first heard about the Rebel Grad Slam, I was like, well, how does that translate into a professional presentation of my research? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I have spent my whole life researching how to utilize my instrument, which is my body and my voice. And so I did a presentation on acting technique and how to basically express emotion and tell stories in a way that is understandable for other people. And I actually think that was one of the things that set me apart, is that it was just different from a lot of the other presentations there. And just in terms of subject matter, which I know obviously you can't really change what your subject is at this point, but just in terms of subject matter, but also in terms of I really had to think about how I would present my research in such a way that somebody who had never acted before in their life or thought about it could understand it. And I think that question in particular is what really helped me stand out. That and the fact that I did at demonstration. I basically did a demonstration of what I do in my 3-minute presentation. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love that yours was unique presentation, and I hope everyone on call knows that there's room for creativity in Rebel Grad Slam. Okay, I'll pass it to Nasibeh.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Nasibeh, but you can call me Nasi. I came here, I started my graduate program at UNLV in 2021. I came from Iran. I did my undergrad in microbiology there, and I am doing a PhD now in microbiology as well at UNLV. So my story is that when I started my program, my project, it was pretty complex even for myself to begin with, and I always had a hard time explaining it to others. And I joined the final session of the Rebel Slam as just an audience in 2021, and my lab mate was competing. And when I listened to the presentations, I realized that, oh, I guess it's possible. But then I thought about it, oh, can I do it myself? And it sounded impossible at that time because first of all, I was like, how am I going to talk this well in English, not even my first language. And then how am I going to make this such a complex idea simple and put everything in 3 minutes? So I started thinking about it. I practiced a little bit, and then I didn't feel ready at the time I submitted my slides and my title, but I made it work. I think it was a really good experience for me because it helped me to learn different ways that I can talk about my science. And what sets it apart, I think, is a lot of practice and make a simple story, understandable story, and tell it to everyone.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Dr. Kendra McGlothen.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. My name is Dr. Kendra McGlothen. I received my PhD from UNLV in neuroscience earlier this year, and I have started my kind of professorship here also at UNLV. So all exciting things in terms of the Rebel Grad Slam. I was the first place winner 2 different years, which was super fun. I think that ultimately my approach overall to the 3MT was making it as relatable as possible. Could I give this same exact talk to my best friend? And naturally, I like storytelling, and that's what came easiest to me. So making kind of like parallels to things in movies and things that I knew about growing up in different TV shows and things like that, and kind of bridging the gap in science, because there's this notion that it's so complicated and there's these tiny little things that you care about that no one else will ever care about. But chances are you can make some kind of parallel to something that is meaningful in everyone's life. And that was the main goal that I had going into the 3MT, and it worked very well. I just think that just staying true to yourself and the things that you're naturally passionate about comes across well to an audience, even if they're not in your focused field. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. Just a reminder to the group, if anybody signed on in the last few minutes, if you have questions for our panelists today, please feel welcome to type them in the chat. And you can chat them to me directly if you'd like to remain anonymous for whatever reason at the Grad Academy. So that being said, for the rest of these questions, Kendra, Jenn, and Nasibeh, feel free to just jump in if you're ready to give a response. So we started to touch on it a little bit, but my first question, what are the key elements that make a Rebel Grad Slam presentation engaging and successful? So in your experience, what were those key elements?
I really, oh, you go ahead. Nasi, how do you say her name?
Go ahead.
Nasi?
Nassi.
Nasi, you go first.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to mention that for me, I think simplicity and clarity is important. These are key elements, and just avoiding unnecessary details, keep the talk on point, and I think those are presentation-wise, and performance-wise, maybe sound exciting and definitely sound interesting when you're talking about your research, and show audience why your research is important, why you're doing it, and what impact it will have on everyone.
Yes, to everything Nancy just said. I also really loved what Kendra said about making it relatable, because I know that I've lived in my own little box for decades at this point, you know, and I'm surrounded by people who also live in that box with me. And so when doing the Grad Rebel Slam, I found it really, really helpful to what once again, I'm just repeating what Kendra said, but that she could give it to her best friend, or who give your presentation to different people and ask them, do you understand? Are you excited about this? Do you have any questions? Because we forget that other people don't know the things that we know and aren't living the same experiences that we are every single day, because we all live on our own little boxes. And so just, I love making it as relatable as possible and as simple as possible and as exciting as possible.
Yes, yes, yes to every single thing that was already said. I would add probably in terms of making it specifically engaging, I would say find whatever your technique is, whether it is storytelling, an analogy, or like something visually that'll resonate with people immediately, to get the audience excited about whatever it is that you have to say, and do a lot of the heavy lifting of keeping the attention of someone on your slides and by how you choose to tell that story. And I would say, yeah, clarity. Just pick just one thing that you want them to walk away knowing, and then stick to that. I know sometimes it seems like there's a lot of pressure to say every single thing that you've ever done in this 3 minutes, but it always goes way further if there's just one clear thing that you need them to know. And then from then on, it all works out.
Thank you so much. So I see you have a question in the chat, and I'll promise to get back to you, but I think that's a really good segue. So one clear takeaway is one of, the suggestions that you all have for condensing this complex research or complex activity into 3-minute presentations. Any other tips for strategizing that piece?
I'd just say, what is at the heart of what you do? What is the most important thing to you, or what is the most interesting thing to you about what you are currently doing and working on? If you can figure out that question, you have your 3 minutes.
Adding to Jen's comment, I totally agree with you. I think I always tell my friends this, that imagine that you're explaining your research to a kid and children, and how would you explain it to them? As simple as possible. So I usually start with that and make a very simple story. And then once I finish the story, and then I go ahead and read it and add the details that I need to have for my other audience to it. And then after that, I refine it. I add a lot of unnecessary details, but after that, I refine it and I think about each element. And I think that, do I need to have this piece of information in my talk? Can I delete it? Is it still going to be good, informative, if I delete it? And then I try to trim it as much as I can and just avoid unnecessary details.
Yeah, to Nassie's point, getting rid of the extra fat in terms of the jargon that you put in, like everyday words that you think people might know what you're saying because you've said it 1,000,000,007 times. Break it down to a smaller word. The smaller, the better. So like she said, if you were going to give that same talk to someone in 5th grade, would they have a clue what you're talking about? And then I would say also trim the fat in the overall structure of your talk. So make it simple: intro, middle, conclusion. You don't have to have as many parts to the talk as you think.
Thank you all. Yeah, I mean, and part of simplifying it, that's how you're going to make it approachable to people from different audiences. Because it's not like these presentations are for kids, but it's got to be people, that maybe we don't understand the jargon of neuroscience. Sorry, Kendra. But yeah, so simplifying is definitely best. Okay, so let's grab a couple of questions from the chat here. I'm not sure if any of you all can speak to this, but is there a balance that you experience between making something relatable and avoiding controversy?
That's a beautiful question. I think that there is a balance, and it's also an art form. Like, it's a little bit of skill that starts to come into play when you're talking about teetering the balance, because on one hand, you need to say everything that someone in your field would understand, agree with, and essentially it's kind of like the taller kids in the class. You want to be able to reach that end of the spectrum, and you also don't want to lose anybody who has never even heard of your field ever. And in that, sometimes I think that depending on whatever your topic is, if it is something that is naturally contentious, you end up trimming that fat too much where it doesn't support all of what you found or all of the things that would go in a discussion portion of your research, essentially. So I'd say to that, I would still cater more towards the large population of people who are going to be listening to the talk, but have that in the back of your mind where if you were able to answer that question of that expert, I'd probably add one sentence that just addresses it, but doesn't make your entire presentation about it. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's what I think about when I'm trying to be on both sides of the spectrum for a topic that I'm trying to relate to a broader audience.
I can add a little bit of to your beautiful comment. I think it's always a great idea to have examples and simplify it in a relatable way that your audience can understand. For example, I work on microbial communities. They have a lot of technical terms for it, but in my talk, I used an example of a city of like different people that lives there, which is still true about what it actually could be, like in terms of my research, but it's simple enough for everyone else to understand it. So if you want to simplify it and make relatable examples for your research, keep it at a point and don't go too far with your imaginations. But I think it's a great way to use examples and things that people can understand because they already know it.
I would say if it were me, most people just want to be heard, right? Acknowledge the controversy and then press forward with what you are presenting, with what side you are presenting on that controversy is what I would do depending on the topic. But just, yeah, that's it. I don't need to repeat it again. I have a tendency to go in circles when I get excited.
Thank you. Okay, so thank you for addressing that question. We've got some questions coming in the chat, folks. Here we go. So we talked about simplifying things, distilling things down to make it approachable to any audience. The question is, how do you balance taking complicated research from any given field and making it accessible like that without making it sound too silly?
I would say if you are going to choose some kind of analogy, some kind of story, you want it to be something that makes sense for it. And if it makes sense, you can make anything work. It won't come across as silly. So a more concrete example, in one of the presentations that I gave, I was trying to get everybody to understand the concept of what a mitochondria is and what it does and how I used it in my study. And I made a parallel with Star Wars and a very common thing that is used in Star Wars. And so anytime that I reference this thing that happens in Star Wars, technically some people would think of it as silly, but it was relevant. If it's relevant and it's concise and it helps your audience get closer to an understanding you need them to have, it's not silly, it's useful, it's a tool. So obviously you would want to pick something that is true to whatever it is that you're trying to, convey, and not pick something random, but 9 times out of 10, you can make anything work.
I would say just have respect for those you're talking to and excitement about what you're talking about, and it will come across as interesting and good research, no matter what you do. And I would just say, once again, it's already been said several times, just practice. Practice with people and then ask for feedback. Practice with your roommates, with friends. If you can get random people to listen to you in the hallways, say, hey, can I steal you for 3 minutes? Just practice and ask for feedback and then take that feedback and fine tune what you're doing.
I totally agree with the 2 comments.
Perfect. Thank you all. So our next question. So this competition, it's open to students at all levels of research. So you might not be actively engaged in your research if you're participating this year. You might be planning for it. Does anyone on the panel have tips for that sort of student? So someone who's been reading, gathering background information, but not like actually into the deep data collection or actual research yet. How do you think that person can fill up the 3 minutes is the question.
I can share because I was in the same position when I did the 3-minute grad slam. I didn't have data, and you don't actually need that much data to do 3-minute talk, because how many of your data you can put on your slide? To be honest, maybe one, maybe two graphs. So I think don't worry about not having enough data or not having done any actual like hands-on research. Just I think the big picture is important. The significance of your research is important. You should talk about those. You can talk about the overview of how are you going to answer this big research question that you have, and what could be the outcome and how everyone can benefit from this research. I think those are enough elements. I didn't put any data on my presentation.
Yes to everything Nancy just said. It's one of the reasons why I think a lot of people from the fine arts don't do Rebel Grad Slam, is because we don't have charts and files and research articles. And so the question is, what do we do for 3 minutes to present? And so what I did was I talked about what I've been studying and how it impacted me and how it impacted others. And then I like literally my slide was my slide had some like a list of like acting techniques that I have been studying that I studied for 3 years at UNLV. And then I talked about those 3 things. Like as long as you're talking about, like, I'm repeating myself again. Yeah. As long as you're talking about what you are passionate about and the impact that it has, you can fill 3 minutes with that.
Again, yes to every single thing that they said. If I were to add something, I would say in terms of like engaging your audience, knowing that you're not going to necessarily lead them to, well, how did the story end? Like it wouldn't be an introduction, middle, and conclusion in that sort of traditional way. I would more so change the perspective and make it more like a trailer. Like, this is the coolest movie I'm gonna ever see, and this is why it's important, and this is where we're going, and leave it on a cliffhanger. Like you can make it work for you, depending on wherever you are in the program. You can still make it work to be engaging.
Thank you so much. I feel like this is a good time to mention that if anyone is curious to see any of these presentations, you can check them out on the Grad College YouTube channel. So you can see Kendra's presentation from last year, or Nasi's or Jenn's from past years and last year. Okay, so we have one more question in the chat at the moment. So looking back at your experience, what were you most surprised by, and what would you change, if anything?
I can tell the most thing that was surprising for me was the timer for the final session. I think semifinal too. When I was practicing, I would just start a timer just like from 0.0 to 3 minutes and practice. And then when I did the actual talk, I realized, oh, it's actually counting down. And now I'm looking at the time, feeling kind of nervous. And I think I realized that system in semifinal. So I started practicing with countdown timer, so I won't get nervous.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that understanding like the nuances of an audience, like there are different rounds, and the reactions that you give for certain things that you say can be drastically different between rounds. So if there's like one area where you're expecting there to be, you know, like a bit of like a comic relief and it doesn't happen, don't let it throw you off. But yeah.
There were 2 things that surprised. I don't know that there's anything I would change as of right now. I'll think on it though. There were 2 things that surprised me. One I've already mentioned. It's just I live in my own little fine arts world box most of the time, and it was so lovely seeing all the presentations and seeing what everybody at the university was doing and being like, oh, that's really cool. I want to learn more about this facet or this aspect of what they're doing. So it was just really delightful meeting other students and hearing about what they were studying and working on. And the second thing, what Kendra said reminded me, it was interesting, the different experiences in the rounds. I did it, there was at least one online. Is there still one online round? Is the first one online, or are they all in person now?
Yep, preliminary rounds are still going to be virtual this year.
Yeah, just the experience of presenting in each round was very different, and also how it was received was different as well too, depending on the judges. Which I live in a world where I'm constantly judged every time I go into an audition or Or like, so it's something that I don't think about very much, but like you might, like, I think I think I came in first in my first 2 rounds, and I was one of the third place winners in the final round, which very happy with all of them. But somebody who came second in my second round beat me in the final round, and maybe that was my presentation in the final round. Maybe like everything is subjective. So even if you go into this and you don't feel like you've succeeded, know that one, the experience itself is very well worthwhile doing, and two, it's subjective. Anytime you perform, or it's what it is. For me, I looked at this as a performance because that's what I study. But anytime you perform, how it is received is subjective. And so even if you come out of this not winning, it doesn't mean you've failed. And actually, I think failure is a good thing. So even if you fail, it's a good thing. So yes.
Thank you so much. I think this prompts me to share a few logistics with you all on the call. So so when it comes to judging, judges have a rubric that they follow, right? But as Jen said, there's still a subjective component to this because there's different judges for every session. They may or may not be tied to your path of study or your field. So it's going to vary every single round. And I got a private question in the chat here. Are we allowed to use a timer during preliminary rounds? So I just want to break that down for a moment too. So we will have preliminary rounds will all be virtual via Zoom, and we will use the Zoom timer with each presentation. So just the built-in Zoom timer, you'll see it at the top of your screen throughout your presentation. And then both our semifinals and our final round this year are going to be at the Greenspun Hall Auditorium. And the timer is on a little TV monitor right in front of you during presentation. So just to demystify what the actual experience will look like, that is what it would look like as you progress. Okay, so please feel welcome again. If you have additional questions, to drop them in the chat. I will go ahead and look to my list here. And I think one thing we haven't talked about too much are slides. So can you share any tips you have for designing your slide? How do you design a single slide that's going to support but not overwhelm your presentation?
Keep it simple. That's my biggest tip. Keep it simple. I think I had one image, and then I had 20 words. Like I said, it was very specific to what I was studying. But literally, I think I had 20 words and an image on my slide, and it was simple and easy for them to understand and see.
I can add to your comment. I think just avoid putting too many things on your slide. And again, keep it simple. Don't put things on your slide if you're not going to talk about it. Only put information that you are going to talk about it. If it's there and you're not talking about it, they're not going to look at it. So it's just waste of space. One of my friends used numbers for different information on one slide, which she found it helpful. I think that's a good way to do it as well. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think that it has a lot to do with whatever field you're coming from. Like I've seen some people kind of like map it out where it has like 3 parts, almost kind of like a poster presentation where it's like, this is the main thing and this is what I found. There's some people that just do one picture and it's something that's like captivating. It makes them want to know more about why you chose that picture. But outside of keeping it simple, you would want someone who saw your presentation, if they were to look at your slide one more time, they'd be able to explain it. Like they'd be able to say, oh yeah, she started off talking about this story and then she ended off wanting me to know this. Like your presentation should work for you. That's what it's there for. The slide is for you. It's to remind you of, oh, I wanted to say this. And remember, you're only saying a couple of things, so it should only have a couple of things. But yeah, your slide should work for you, not against you. And against you would be colors that are hard to see for you or the audience, too much data points. So like we just talked about, if you don't have graphs or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But if you do have graphs, you need to be mindful that they can do more harm than good if they have too many numbers, too many lines, too many things going on. So the keep it simple applies throughout the whole thing, even if you have data or not.
Thank you. Yeah. Slides vary tremendously and all those tips super helpful. Um, so I'd like to, because I know this comes up for many people. What is your advice for handling nervousness or stage fright when presenting in front of a large audience? So thinking of that finals event.
I don't have much to say here, but I think for me personally, when I practice enough and when I feel prepared, I'm less nervous. I'm still pretty nervous, but it makes it less. So that's my tip. Just be prepared, practice a lot. And also, breathing practices that also helped me. Just try to breathe and keep yourself calm. Take your moment before your presentation and close your eyes and try to gather your focus. Those are things that help me.
And say this is literally what I teach, and Nasi just did a great job. I'm like, practice is number one. Grounding yourself before your presentation is always helpful. However you do that for you, whether it's breathing exercises, I tell my students to feel the floor underneath their feet. It's just very helpful. You can also, something that when I'm really nervous, I find helpful, is have somebody in the audience there for you. And if you can, look at them and give your presentation to that person. But practice as much as you can, because no matter what you do, your nerves are going to jump because you're going to have adrenaline, and you care about what you're doing. And so the more you practice, the more you learn how to deal with what your nerves do to your body. And it's different for everyone. So practice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna also piggyback off of. It is gonna be different for everyone else. Like, no one knows you how you know you. So when you get nervous, does your voice start to crack? Are your palms sweaty? Like, whatever it is, anticipate it happening and what would soothe you best in that moment. And addition to practicing, don't do the type of practice where you start your timer and you're going and you're all in, and then you mess up and you're saying, dang, I got to do it from the beginning. No. Keep going. Practice with the mistake in it. Can you still fit in 3 minutes? Because it might not go perfect. You need to be able to practice it perfectly and imperfectly. And you practicing enough of those versions, no matter what the day holds, you feel good. You will feel like you are prepared, and that'll help ease some of that anxiety.
Thank you all. That is a great segue into another question. So any other tips that you have for helping people stay within that 3-minute timer, which everyone on the call, we are strict with that. Any tips that you have for them?
I can share what I did for my talk. I wrote down all of my script for the talk, and I read it a couple of times. When I felt ready, I started timing myself, but make sure you do a countdown timer so you get used to it. Or you can start with just a regular timer and then shift to countdown, whatever works for you. And then I just practice a lot with the timer and make sure, again, if I make it practice, keep going and try to fix that and put everything in 3 minutes. Don't talk too fast. Don't forget to have pause. That's good for your audience focus. And yeah, I think those are my tips.
I get nervous about that type of thing, a time limit. And so my recommendation, and take it or leave it, would be to aim for a little bit less than 3 minutes, honestly. Like, I think I aimed for 240, 245 for mine, so that if I took longer than I expected, I had an extra 10, 15 seconds to work with. But that is me. And you might be really good at hitting that 3-minute mark every time and using every single second. If that works for you, go for it. But aiming for a little bit less worked well for me and the nerves that I get when I present.
Really great points. I would just say also that when you are practicing, you start to pick up a regular pace, a regular cadence for how you like to say this specific thing. After looking at the timer and doing it enough times, you realize, oh, when I get to the middle part of my talk, it takes me about 1 minute and 15 seconds. You can almost play a game with yourself. Well, at least I did, where if I did make a mistake, well, what part can I jump to still be in that time frame? Or if it got to the point where I'm almost to the end, but I'm running out of time, I have like 15 seconds left, I want them to know this sentence. This is how I'm closing it. I want it to be clear that I said what I needed to say. Thank you. Like, at least get to your go, no go. This is the sentence I'm saying at the end. I have 15 seconds left, and then conclude. Don't try to go over, don't try to speed up, don't try to I guess force something, because that might end up tripping you up and make you go over anyway. So sometimes you need to make like an executive decision in the moment. Do I have enough time to say this bit that I know takes this much time? No? Okay. How can I either sum it up really even smaller than what I was going to originally say, or skip to my ending conclusion so it feels like the presentation had a full, robust, script. At the end of the day, most people are going to remember the beginning and the end. And if the end is sped through and it feels like she didn't get to finish the thing that she wanted to say, or he didn't get to that last big statement to bring it home, it'll be more obvious than if you didn't say a sentence or two in the middle.
Thank you. So we talked about pace, we talked about nerves, we talked about like being engaging. Let's take it one step further and talk a little bit about what body language and delivery, how those are going to affect your presentation, and how can students work on that?
I think body language is very important because it shows your emotions, maybe shows that you're nervous if you do certain body languages. I would say avoid looking at your slide too many times. Avoid like crossing your hands or putting your hands in your pockets. Do not look at your wristwatch. I think those body languages should be avoided. Other than that, you can use your hands. Just talk about your research, be excited, be energetic. And also don't walk too fast. It's nice to walk around a little bit, but I think walking too much could be distracting.
I could jump in there. I agree. Look, nothing's worse than watching the back of someone's head as they talk to their slide and completely ignore you. So be mindful of the audience, where you're standing in front of your slides. If you're talking about something specific, don't stand in front of that area. I would say, just in the same way that you explained, your body language can determine if you're nervous. It can also give the audience a sense of whether you want to be there or whether you're even excited about the topic you're trying to excite them about. So different facial expressions at different parts of your presentation is helpful. I naturally speak with my hands always. But too much of that can be distracting. So for someone like me, maybe me hooking one of my thumbs into my pocket is a better thing. Or if you are someone who needs more oomph in their presentation, maybe take your hand out of your pocket. Like, it depends on the person. But ultimately, you want to shoulders back, confident. If you're confident about what you're talking about, it eases the audience and allows them to listen to you versus to pay attention to whatever you're doing, if that makes sense.
You two could come teach my classes, or at least some of them. Yeah, what Kendra was just saying, I usually refer to as like defaults. Just be aware of what your defaults are, what you do. And they're not bad things. They're things you do either really well or naturally. I am very fast. I like to rush when I get nervous, and I like to move and also talk with my hands. And once again, not a bad thing, but when I'm presenting, I have to ground myself, take away my weight shifts, my movement, and remember to slow myself down. So just being aware of what you do, once again, it comes back to the practicing, and having people give you feedback if you can't figure it out yourself. But generally speaking, and this is just an opinion, but I think yeah, being open, body language, also professional attire. Like you guys caught me on a day off. I would not wear this sweater to my presentation for the Rebel Grad Slam. I wore more professional dress. I think I had on a suit coat and a shirt for or a dress, I think, in one of my rounds. So I made sure that I looked professional every time I spoke as well. And then just like I said, grounding myself, being open, and then also smiling. Smile. Let people know you're excited about what you're doing. And I know women especially get told to smile a lot, but like it's also how we put people at ease. So yeah.
Also, one thing, don't forget eye contact with your audience.
I'm just going to build on that real quick. Any tips then for the preliminary rounds when we're virtual? Anything you'd
Yes.
add?
Clear back, like this is my messy background. Have a clear background if you can, something that doesn't distract, because if that's there, well, one, you can only see my eyes, but they're going to be looking at these lovely glass balls that I have hanging up there, or at the pictures in the background. If you can't, Zoom allows for, you guys are using Zoom, allows for the blurred background, right? Or something, set something so that they're focused on you and not your background. Lighting and sound. Can they see you? Can they hear you?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes. Oh,
Sorry, go
you go
ahead.
for it.
I just wanted to mention that I went to the UNLV library study pods. It was simple, quiet, no one else could hear me. I couldn't hear anyone else, and it made it easier for me.
I was just gonna add on, if it is in a digital form, do your best to look at your camera, as it'll come across as looking into someone's eyes versus looking at yourself. I know it feels better to look at yourself. I've been doing it this whole time, but I mean, this alone gets people more excited to like talk to you. It feels more personal, that's all, in that setting specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, pretty different experience from the prelims to the semifinals when you're on the stage or stage area at Greenspun. Okay, so a few questions in the chat here I don't want to miss. So Thomas, for the PowerPoint slide, no, transitions are not allowed. So there are pretty strict rules with the slide, and these come from the like global 3MT 3-minute thesis organization's rules. So when you go to download the slide template, you will see all the guidelines on that template. So just make sure that you're following the guidelines. If the slides are missing any of the guidelines, we'll ask you to like resubmit them. So just keep in mind to follow the guidelines when you create your PowerPoint. Any thoughts from the group? What should someone be careful about when talking about research involving current events? So I think we touched on this a bit, but is there anything that you would add about that?
I would say just kind of what Jen said to that question, just make sure to be respectful about, I'm not sure what the current event is, but if it's something happening now that is relevant to maybe certain people, not others, I would make sure to be mindful of that, just to make sure that no one in the audience feels singled out or left out of a conversation, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm also not sure what type of event, but I would say just keep everyone happy. Don't make anyone mad or upset.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It says DB. I'm not sure your name, but you can unmute if you'd like to give us a little context there.
Would just say, to adding on to what Kendra and Nasibeh already said, don't demonize the other side, because everybody has their own viewpoint, right? And there are good things I mean, you could make an argument against that, but generally speaking, most sides feel like they are in the right and have good reasons for believing what they do. So just don't demonize the other side.
Okay, thank you all. And then we have a question about the slide. Is the text supposed to be white or black on the title slide? So the title slide can stay exactly the format as is. So it's got white text, so that can stay exactly how it is. You just want to enter your information and change that. Okay, so we are kind of nearing the end of our session here. I want some good, solid questions. So I think I'd like to share just a little bit more about if you have any further like major pieces of advice. And also, did you notice as you were going through your presentation in the different rounds and you were seeing other presentations, are there any mistakes you noticed or things that you would recommend that students avoid?
A lot of the things that I saw were honestly just down to either I don't necessarily want to say a lack of preparedness. A lot of it was just presentation. honestly. And granted, that's coming from somebody who, like, that's what I study is performance and how do you perform for people. But figuring out how to represent your research well is going to benefit you not only in this competition, but in real life as well too. And a lot of that comes down to like public speaking stuff. How do you keep people engaged? Are you clear? Is everything clear and simple? Are you animated? Are you someone that people are you presenting, like, can they hear you? There were some people who presented and I was like, wait, what are they saying? And yeah, so just literally looking up public speaking facts. We've talked about quite a lot of them in here, but the presentation was what I noticed the most. And those who presented well generally went further on in the competition because people could relate more to what they were saying.
I can add to that. I think overall presentations that I thought needed more edits were the ones that didn't follow the things that we've been talking about today. But also, I would say try not to memorize your script unless you know this is the final version, or just avoid big changes between rounds, because I've seen that people would get too nervous or get confused about memorizing different things or making big changes. That's not easy to prepare for another round, in my opinion. Also, being too formal, talking too formally, I think something that could be avoided. Sometimes people don't, people talk in a different way than when they present. They change their vocabulary and they make everything more formal, that they don't feel comfortable talking that way. So I think that should be avoided too. You should talk in a way that is still formal, but you're not using too many difficult words.
I would also tag on, I saw pacing was something that I would change throughout a presentation where it feels rushed more so at the end or even going over the time limit. I also saw, I think that it's not necessarily for Rebel Grad Slam. I don't think there's a Q&A portion, correct?
So if time allows, we might do so at the finals event, but it won't be part of the preliminary rounds.
I would say in the Q&A segments that I have seen in these different kind of forums, sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know. I think sometimes you can do more harm than good if you honestly don't know the answer, but you are answering something as if you do know, which is completely different than conjecturing something, which is always amazing. If you have an idea of what it could be, that's fine. But sometimes I would see people kind of run on instead of giving a concise answer. But outside of those, everything that Jen and Nasi said is straight on.
Another thing I was thinking about is that when you're talking, try not to be like you're reading from a book. Raise your voice or maybe lower a little bit if when necessary, and try to play with fluctuate your voice. And that's I think good skill that keeps your audience's focus on your talk.
That's a really good point. I'll just say this last thing. Also, it was really clear for the people who had written a script after the very first preliminary round, and then they had to do it for the next round, and they were tripped up because they were trying to remember the script. So either you need to practice it where you know it like the back of your hand, or you should be able to speak organically to the things that you're speaking about. It should be no difference between the prelim and the next round. It should be just as smooth.
Thank you all so much. So I know we didn't get to a few questions in the chat here, but please feel welcome to email Grad Academy. If you have any questions about your slide or about what the experience looks like, please feel welcome to email gradacademy@unlv.edu, and we will get back to you. So last but not least, I just want to thank our presenters for joining us today. So thank you so much, Jen and Nasibeh and Dr. Kendra McGlothen. So glad to have you all here and share your experience with this group. everyone out there, you have a chance. I promise, if you get in, if you practice, if you're ready for the preliminary rounds, you're going to have a chance to advance and win those scholarships at every level and be able to communicate your research in under 3 minutes, which is huge. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to drop our survey link in the chat here for workshops. So if you could take just a few minutes to fill that out. We do that for all of our surveys so that we can, or for all of our workshops so that we can make them better in the future. So thank you again, panelists, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you everyone who joined.
Thank
Thank
you,
you so
Alyssa.
much, everyone.
Bye.